Today, we're going to dig into one of the greatest strategic turnarounds in all of history. We're going to uncover a mental model that was forged in the absolute ashes of defeat, a way of thinking that let one man save an entire republic and, in the process, completely rewrite the rules of power. This is the Scipio Equation. Okay, let's just jump right in, because this one single realization, it's the key to everything. We're talking about Carthage, an empire whose top general Hannibal had turned Italy into a Roman graveyard. I mean, he was an unsolvable problem, a total nightmare. And everyone in Rome was obsessed with his armies, with the teeth of the beast, right? But one young man realized the predator's power lived somewhere else entirely, in its stomach. And he decided, you know what? I'm not going to fight the beast head on. I'm going to starve it. Now, to really get the genius of the solution, we have to feel just how desperate the problem was. Picture it. We're in Rome around 211 BC. The Republic is teetering on the edge of collapse, and it feels like every messenger who arrives just brings more news of slaughtered sons. What's so fascinating here is that Rome wasn't losing because it was weak. No, it was losing because it was too predictable. The Roman way of war was like a giant hammer, powerful, direct, honorable. You just meet the enemy head on. But Hannibal? Hannibal was a ghost. He was thinking in 3 dimensions while the Romans were stuck in 1. He was literally using their own system, their own sense of honor, against them. 50,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. 50,000. That isn't just a statistic, you know? That number is a deep, deep scar on the Roman soul. We're talking 50,000 of their soldiers killed in a single day at the Battle of Cannae. An entire generation of leadership just erased in an afternoon. This wasn't just a defeat, it was a psychological catastrophe. And here's the really crucial part. The Romans at Cannae didn't die because they weren't brave. They died from a total lack of imagination. Their generals followed the textbook, right? They used the standard maneuvers they had drilled 1,000 times over. They marched straight into Hannibal's trap because the book said that's what you do. Their thinking was just as rigid as their shield wall. So with Italy basically in flames, the Senate turns its attention to another front, Spain. Now Spain is where Carthage gets its silver, its supplies, its reinforcements, it's the stomach of the beast. But sending a general there, it was seen as a death sentence. So when the call goes out for a new commander, the forum is met with just a deafening silence. Nobody wants that job. And into that silence steps a young man. He's only in his mid-20s, Publius Cornelius Scipio. And he isn't just applying for a job, he's making a profound strategic statement. While all the old guard generals were debating defense and delay, Scipio saw that the only way to save Rome was to attack the source. He was looking for the hinge, that one single pressure point that could change the entire geometry of the war. So who was this guy? Well, he wasn't some golden boy hero, not at all. He was an outsider, a pariah, and his genius was forged not in some fancy classroom, but in fire and in isolation. Let's just quickly trace this journey. At just 18, he does something incredible, an act of what you'd call sovereign defiance. He charges an enemy cavalry wing all by himself to save his father. A few years later, he's one of the few who survives Cannae. And standing there, in all that dust and blood, he has this horrifying epiphany. The Roman way of war is a death sentence. Back home, he's an outsider, a pariah. Why? Because he's interested in Greek philosophy, in studying first principles instead of just military tradition, which was deeply un-Roman. And this all culminates in his Spanish command, a 4-year exile where he's completely cut off from support. And all of this led him to a really radical conclusion. The very identity he was supposed to cherish, this idea of fighting like a Roman, was actually a documented disease. He saw that the Roman legion was a hammer, but Hannibal was a ghost, and you can't smash a ghost. Man, that was a dangerous thought for a Roman to have. But you know what? That isolation became his greatest asset. Under the hot Spanish sun, totally cut off from Rome's rigid rules, he was forced to learn everything from the ground up. He spent his nights interviewing local fishermen about the tides, talking to scouts about mountain passes. He learned the answer wasn't in some old book. It was in the land itself. And this is how he figured out he could use a low-tide lagoon to just walk his army right around the walls of New Carthage, the enemy capital. The terrain became his weapon. Okay, so let's get to the core of his revolution. From all this, the trauma, the isolation, the study, a new philosophy of power emerged, an asymmetric mindset that was about to change the world. This chart just perfectly contrasts the two worldviews. On one side, you've got the Roman hammer. Clash head-on, react to what the enemy does, fight anyone who stands against you. Simple. But Scipio's logic, the ghost, was completely different. His number one rule, strike the stomach, not the teeth. Don't just be a passive recipient. You have to actively displace their entire strategy. Don't just fight their allies. Give them a really good reason to join you. By refusing to plunder the cities he conquered, he turned resentful subjects into willing partners. He understood the greatest weapon wasn't the sword, it was the narrative you build. And the formal name for all this is strategic displacement. See, it's not about out-muscling your opponent. It's about finding a simple, undeniable truth, a low tide, an unhappy ally, and applying pressure to that one single point until the entire structure of the conflict just shifts. It's about fundamentally redesigning the game so that you can't possibly lose. But look, a philosophy is totally useless if it just stays in your head. Scipio's real genius was turning this mindset into a system. He treated his army not as a weapon, but as a laboratory for truth. He put specific habits into place. First, the decentralized drill. He broke up the rigid Roman line into these smaller, more flexible squads called manibles. Think of them like a modern special forces team instead of a big, clumsy marching band. They could adapt on the fly. Second, the terrain audit. He systematically mapped not just enemy positions, but their supply lines, their water sources, even their morale. This technical knowledge cut through all the noise of what a brave commander was supposed to do, and it revealed what would actually work. And this whole system had its ultimate test at the Battle of Zama. Hannibal, totally cornered, unleashes his trump card, 80 war elephants. These were the ancient equivalent of tanks. The old Roman way, you'd form a denser shield wall, which, by the way, would have been smashed to pieces. But Scipio uses clever simplicity. As the Punic elephant trumpets blast and these terrifying beasts charge, the Roman soldiers just step aside. He'd created wide lanes right through his formation. The panicked elephants just thundered harmlessly through the gaps and were picked off from the sides. It's the perfect expression of his philosophy. Don't block the force, redirect it. Scipio's victory at Zama didn't just end a war, it ended an entire era. It cemented a new way of thinking about power, a legacy that we can actually codify and learn from today. The Scipio Equation is this idea that you can destroy empires with clever simplicity. It's a structural weapon. It proves that victory isn't about having more soldiers or more brute force. It's about seeing the unvarnished logic of a situation and acting on it, whether that logic is a low tide, an unhappy population, or the predictable path of a charging elephant. Logic, not numbers, is what dictates the outcome. This journey shows a pretty remarkable transformation, right? He went from being a pariah, taking a suicide mission, to the architect of Rome's greatest victory. He took a republic that was on its knees and transformed it into the master of the Mediterranean. But there's a tragic postscript. The very Roman system he saved couldn't handle a man who thought so far outside the box. They grew suspicious of his power, and he ended up dying in self-imposed exile, rejected by the very city he rescued. But Scipio's story is so much more than ancient history. It's a timeless guide for anyone who's facing what feels like an unbeatable opponent, anyone being ignored by the old guard, or feeling crushed by a superior force. It's a roadmap for turning weakness into strength. So I want you to ask yourself, what is your new Carthage? What is that one problem in your life, at work, in your career, that just seems too big to handle? Where are you playing the game on someone else's terms? Where are you still trying to use a hammer to fight a ghost? And I want to leave you with this final thought. Scipio teaches us that real power isn't in conforming or just fighting harder inside a broken system. No, it's in our ability to step back, find the simple, unvarnished logic of a situation, and act on it. You don't have to be the strongest. You just have to be the one who sees the opening that everyone else missed. The truth is in the logic, and your simplicity is the code for your greatness.